Welcome to the Thesis Study Lab's thesis preparation video, and in this video we're going to talk about some tools. Now, one of the first categories of tools you're probably curious about is AI. So is AI your friend or an enemy? So depends on the movie, I guess. In the first movie, T-800 was an enemy, but in the second, they become a friend. So it really depends. Overall, I would say that AI tools alone are not enough. They need your expertise to effectively use them. So if AI gives you some code, then you need to apply your expertise in analyzing and improving that code. Oftentimes AI lies to you, gives you broken code or broken text or broken facts. So you need to be a professional enough to analyze it, and you need to have this expertise yourself to improve on what the AI gives you. And this is very important in the context of your thesis. So when you're defending your thesis, you need to be able to defend everything that is in there, and you need to be able to think about it, you need to be able to understand it. Now, when we're talking about AI, we can differentiate between substantive use and polishing. So substantive use would include, let's say, you're asking AI for some questions for an interview or a questionnaire, or you're asking some code or architectural design or game design. Even ideation is substantive use. In the middle of your work, you might do data analysis or code fixes or thesis assessment or work assessment or data assessment. So this is all substantive use. You're using AI for the actual contents, the substance of your thesis. And this is very important to distinguish the substantive use from polishing. So with polishing, you might use AI for improving text readability or grammar or flow or spelling improvements or even code formatting. So there is this polishing use, this formative or using AI to improve the appearance of your thesis, and substantive use that uses AI to improve the contents of your thesis. In other words, we could say that substantive use is grading and assessing things. And substantive use in this way must be described in the corresponding chapters of your thesis with reasonable thoroughness. So if you used AI to create your interview questions, then you need to say what was the prompt, what questions did you got, and how did you improve those questions, or what were the subsequent prompts. One of the good methods to describe this is to have a journal. So in one of the appendix you could include your AI journal. What were the prompts, how you used AI, at what steps in your thesis did you use it, how, what did you improve, what was the input, what was the output, and how that all contributed to the substance of your thesis. What did you use it for and when, and what were the example prompts. This should be in the journal in the appendix, and of course described in the specific methodology chapter. So if you used AI to come up with a design of your game, then describe that in the design chapter of your thesis. Or if you used AI to gather some sources for your survey, then what prompts did you use, what AI, what models should be in your survey data collection chapter. But now when it comes to polishing, let's say you wrote some text, everything is almost done, but you think the flow of your paragraphs or sentences can be improved. Then you used AI, you copy-pasted a chapter into AI and said, please improve the readability and flow of this chapter. And you got out a better paragraph or better sentences, and you pasted them in your thesis and maybe improved on those yourself as well. Then that is kind of the polishing part. Now, I recommend you to be careful with this as well, because if you copy-paste your paragraph into AI and it kind of polishes it, then sometimes it changes the ideas that you wanted to convey. So if the result of the polishing with AI gives you some paragraphs or sentences that actually say different things than what you originally meant, then of course you need to fix this. You cannot be in your defense and the opponent asks you, like, what do you mean by this sentence, and say that, I don't know, AI maybe changed this sentence, I never meant it this way. So that's very bad. So when you're using AI for polishing, you are still responsible for the result that is written in your thesis. But if you're doing that, then it's sufficient to just mention at the end of the introduction that you used ChatGPT or whatever for improving the readability of your text. And that will be sufficient. Now this is all about AI tools. Now we're moving to illustration tools. Of course, there are plenty of other things, other tools. We mentioned Zotero in the previous videos. And of course, Google Docs and Word are tools. We will focus on Word in some of the future videos, and we focused on Zotero in the previous video. But in the second part of this video, we're going to focus on illustration tools, or how to create figures for your thesis. So if you want to make geometric illustrations, so you have some sort of vectors, some geometric coordinates, points in 2D space, 3D space, some logic that can be defined or illustrated with geometry, then I recommend GeoGebra Classic 5. Now GeoGebra has also an online version, and there's GeoGebra 6. I personally still recommend 5. I think the menus are much easier to navigate in Classic 5 than in other versions of GeoGebra. But of course it's up to you which one you want, but this really gives you a very nice tool set for geometric illustrations. And here is how GeoGebra Classic 5 looks like. So you have these two axes, you can pan around with the middle mouse click, and you have these menus. You can add points, A, B, C, and D, and you can rename them. You can add lines, line segments. With points you also have lots of options here. Rays, polylines, vectors, vector from point. You can have perpendicular lines, parallel lines, bisectors, angle bisectors, tangents, so all sorts of different things. Polygons, circles, semicircles, arcs, ellipses, angles with given size. You can reflect around different things. You can even have sliders and variables, and well, you can also put images here, but I would recommend adding images later. I will show you that workflow in a bit. But basically, if you have some kind of a geometric situation, so let's say you have these points, you want to make an angle from, I don't know, CAB. So this is how you make an angle. And you can use move those labels around, and we will see a better workflow on how to improve the visual look. But now you have this angle, and if you move this point, well, this angle basically changes. You can of course put some line segments here, or maybe you want to put vectors here. So you maybe have a vector from A to B and A to C. You can also modify some of the visual look here. So let's say you have these labels, or A, B, C. So let's remove this D for now. So if you open the properties window on the right, you can have your basic properties. You have color, maybe you want to make it red. You have style, maybe you want to make it larger or smaller. You have your point style, so maybe you want to make this point be a square instead, maybe a bit larger square. Let's make it green. And maybe you don't like that it shows like alpha equals some value, so you can go to basic and just say that the value itself is fine. So let's just show the value of this angle here. And well, this is basically how you can use GeoGebra. You can make all sorts of different things. I often find these perpendicular lines and parallel lines very useful. So if you have some kind of geometrical flow, like you have some radius around which we find other objects, and there are some vectors that are now assigned to those objects, maybe you're visualizing the Boyd's algorithm or whatever algorithm you have there, then this is a very useful tool. And you can also combine different objects. So let's say that we have this point here, and I've currently fixed this point to be at specific coordinates. Now, it doesn't have to be this case. I could just say that this point is actually C, so our point C here, and we can add to it a vector, so plus U. And this will put this point over here, and well, now I cannot like move it because it's defined as C plus U. C is over here, U is here, but I can move the other point. So if I move U, well, this D also changes. Or if I move C, well, this D also goes somewhere else. It's always C plus this vector U. So you can do very interesting geometrical things, and you can be sure that the angles and the properties, like how are these coordinates found, will stay fixed if you use this formula here. Now going back to the different tools, another tool you can use for diagrams is this Draw.io. So sometimes you might want to visualize some sort of a flowchart or a UML diagram. You just go to this web page, you can click on some boxes, you can put arrows between boxes or circles. There is also a UML block there which you can use, and there are also options for styling those elements and diagrams. So this is just a simple thing to use to create some simple flowcharts and simple diagrams. Now for plots, things get a bit tricky. So one interesting tool is this raw graphs. So it's also a web page, it's open source, and if you go there, you can put in your data and you can visualize your data with lots of different diagrams and charts. So you can find the best diagram that fits your data from there, and you can create your initial diagram. You can also stylize that diagram, but I will again in a bit show you a bit better professional workflow on how to style your diagrams. But again, this should give you those basic graphs that you can use to visualize your data. For example, when you're doing your usability testing and you have a questionnaire, you get some numerical data, then you can visualize it as a bar chart or a box plot or a violin diagram and so on with raw graphs. Another thing I will recommend for plots is Plotly. So Plotly, well, it used to have this chart studio, but they discontinued it. But now it's basically a Python library and a JavaScript library. So if you prefer Python or you prefer JavaScript, I really recommend Plotly. It's very easy to use. You can create very pretty graphs with it. And there's lots of variations on what sorts of graphs you can do. And you can use code to parse the data and specify what you want the plot to look like. Even if your data is on some spreadsheet, you can export a comma-separated value file, a CSV file, import it into Plotly with Python or with JavaScript, and then you can use the library to create interesting charts. Plotly also has a lot of variation on what sort of charts you can make with it. Now, when it comes to vector and raster graphics as well, I recommend Affinity Studio. Now, Affinity Studio is a new product. It used to be 3 different products. So Affinity Designer, Affinity Photo, and Affinity Publisher. They all had a single payment cost. So you paid a fee and you got a license, lifetime perpetual license, and you could use that software. But now they published this Affinity Studio, which is free for everyone. You do need a Canva account, but this is a free Canva account. You make that account and you download your Affinity Studio, and it basically incorporates all the capabilities of Affinity Designer and Photo and Publisher. So a really powerful tool. And I really recommend this. I think the UI and the buttons and the layout, everything makes sense. So I have tried using different things like Inkscape and GIMP and so on. Like very hard to navigate, very hard to learn. But with Affinity Studio, I have had students learn it in like a few hours, and they make already beautiful posters and beautiful charts and so on. So Affinity Studio is very useful. The other professional tools would be Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. So if you want to pay a monthly fee to Adobe, then that's also an option. But Affinity Studio does pretty much the same things, and you don't really need these like professional grade things in the Adobe software. The Affinity Studio provides a very good tool set for doing really, really beautiful and useful graphics with just the tools that they provide. And you might be wondering, okay, so what should I use Affinity Studio for? Well, if you have a screenshot and you want to label some things there, previously we saw this example where you can have a zoomed in effect for a screenshot, or you want to have some arrows or labels, then I really recommend using Affinity Studio because it's a vector graphics program. It also has raster graphics and so on, but the vector workflow allows you to specify those labels and arrows in a way that you can change them easily later on. With Paint.net or other things, you can also put arrows on your graphics, but these are raster graphics programs, and if you need to change it, then you're basically stuck with the raster graphics that have been rasterized, and you cannot actually change the vector elements. Or you maybe want to increase the resolution. Well, you can't because it's already rasterized to a specific resolution. So labels and different highlights or different things you can do with screenshots, I would recommend Affinity Studio for using also for those things. But now let's look at this pro workflow. So one thing I use Affinity Studio for is when I've made like a graph or a plot or whatever diagram in other tools. So if you're using R or RStudio, then there is this ggplot, and there is the Matplotlib and other like more, let's say, complicated tools. I think RStudio is pretty complicated. It needs you to have learned it. If you're just learning it for your thesis, might not be such a good idea. It takes a bit, there's a bit of an overhead of like a steep learning curve for it. But if you know RStudio, then of course use it. R actually allows you to analyze your data in a very professional way. So if you have some data, you can really do statistical analysis on it really thoroughly. So that's actually very beneficial. But still, if you don't know R and RStudio and don't want anything to do with it, completely fine. You can use your Plotly or raw graphs or GeoGebra or even Draw.io. You can create your illustration there. And now you can export an SVG file, so scalable vector graphics. SVG file, which you can import into Affinity Studio. And in the Affinity Studio, you can make it beautiful. You can enhance some specific elements, change the fonts, change the layout very, very easily. And then from Affinity Studio, you can export your PNG that you can include in your thesis file. And well, here's an example of a diagram I had in RStudio. So I used ggplot to make this diagram. And well, I don't really like how it looks like. I think some of these things can be a lot better. This legend should be below. These colors I don't really like anymore. I want to put labels on the arrows. I want to change the colors. I want to change the size. So changing these in RStudio and ggplot, I think it's possible. Of course, you can do pretty much anything there, but it takes a lot of time. So what I did was I exported an SVG, put it into Affinity Studio, and made it like this. I moved the legend, I increased the size of the data points, I removed some labels, added some different new labels, and so on. So, of course, maybe this is not the best plot in the world either, but still improving it in Affinity Studio took me way less time than if I would have done it purely with ggplot. And also when you're using, let's say, Plotly or GeoGebra or these other tools, then it really would take you a lot of time to do these visual improvements in these tools compared to just exporting the SVG and using Affinity Studio to do these visual improvements. So let's go back to our GeoGebra example here. So we had this angle, we had these vectors, and now what I will do is I would export this file. I would export it as an SVG. Of course, you save your file as well. So I can export an SVG here. Transparent, that's fine. Export text as shapes, I would uncheck this because this would allow us, if I export it as shapes, then I cannot change the font later on. But if I don't, it will encode it as like text, which can be changed, and the font and the size and everything can be changed later on more easily. So let's save this file. So I'm currently saving it as just test.svg. So let's save it. I've already saved it once, so I override it. And now in Affinity Studio, I can just drag and drop this file here, and here I have the graphics from GeoGebra. Now with Affinity Studio, well, before we do that, I like to use this artboard flow. So I have this artboard, and I can make new artboards. So if I want to have like multiple images in a single file, so if I save this file, this is a single Affinity Designer file. This is a similar example, and I can have like multiple artboards here that include multiple different graphics. But for now, we just need one artboard. So I'm gonna drag and drop this test.svg here. Now one thing that happens is that it kind of embeds the SVG file here. So it's this embedded document. I don't usually, and look, there's this missing font as well. So I don't usually like this embedding. So what I can do, I can take my graphics here, and maybe this is all I need. So I'm gonna just take this away from this embedded thing, and I'm gonna delete this and paste it here. So now I have these arrows and the angle over here, and I can start working on it. Now one thing that GeoGebra specifically does is it kind of overgroups all of these labels and things. For example, this letter C is inside is a double grouping. I don't know why it does that, so I will just remove these groups, or like pull these letters out from the groups. With other tools, this probably doesn't happen that tediously. Of course, you can also just remove these groups, but just to show you how to change fonts, I'm gonna just remove them from the groups. So now I have A, C, B, and D, and now these are text objects. And I can very easily just pick another font. So let's say I want the Rubik font. So this looks maybe better. Light, nope, I want it to be bold. And I want it to be larger. So let's make those letters larger. So maybe I'm working on a illustration for my poster. So I want these letters to be very large so that those would be visible from a poster. Of course, they're overly large right now in relation to the other graphics, so maybe I overdid the font size a bit, so let's make it 48. Now maybe I don't like this blue color here, maybe I want to make it like darker blue, so I can very easily just click on the text and change the color over here. There are also swatches, so if I want to save this color, I can add it to swatches, so let's say from both as global, and now I have this swatch here. And this C, I can also use the swatch color for the C. And now when I double click on the swatch, I can actually change the color, and it changes it for everything that uses that swatch. So I can change one color uniformly across my diagram. Now it seems like GeoGebra is also doing some weird things with these lines and groups. This is some sort of a different object here, so maybe I don't want that object. I'm very happy with this object, so maybe I want to scale it to be a bit bigger. I can very easily do that. These arrows, same thing. Unfortunately, they're a bit overgrouped here, but this is a curve, so maybe this fill that I have seems like it has some sort of an opacity, 70%. So maybe I don't want it to be 70, maybe I want it to be full black. And also perhaps I want it to be above the actual data point so that I can see this arrow pointing into this box here. So basically you have a lot of control to manipulate your diagram here. And of course we can add some new things here as well. So maybe we want to add some text. So I recommend this text box tool or this text frame. So there is also the artistic text tool and text frame tools. So this box, I think it makes a lot of sense. So we could say that the important point is over somewhere. Again, perhaps we want to use Rubik for this, maybe like semi-bold. I don't know if we want to make it black or what color we want to have. And basically we now have this label. We can align the text to be in the center of this box, and we can put it here, and maybe we want to have now another arrow, so we can create an arrow. Maybe we want to have a curved arrow, so something like this perhaps. We can have some stroke for it, and we can have an end arrowhead to be let's say this wide arrow. And now we can easily manipulate this arrow and say that this over here is a very important point. This node here can also be changed into a smooth node, so we can manipulate the gradient here as well. And we can say that, look, here is an important point, and I have an arrow that maybe we want to tweak it a bit to have it be a little bit more smooth. And well, that's pretty okay. And now we move this here and we have a nice little label. If you have your raster graphics screenshots in the background, then adding those labels is very efficient in Affinity Studio as well. There will be another video that talks about like how to visually design this to be visually readable and in balance and good. But basically, yep, you can export your SVG from your GeoGebra or different other tools, Plotly, whatever, and put it here and directly manipulate all of those things. Of course, if you now move this, if you now move this point, and well, this is a bit poor that those two elements are separate, then nothing changes because this doesn't have the GeoGebra logic in it. So only use it for like improving the visuals. And only when you know that your graph in your GeoGebra is gonna pretty much stay the way it is, and because if you make a new graph in GeoGebra, you have to import it here and basically redo the visual enhancements. Regarding this, I would just say that I want this to have where is this? It's again in some group. I would pull it out of the group, and I would say that I want this to have a border, maybe black border, and a stroke. And now I can manipulate the stroke very easily, and I'll move it back here so it snaps to the position. And I'm gonna remove that border, and now I have this other point, and I can increase its size if you want, and do all sorts of things. Again, this blue, one thing I'll also show you that this blue, well, it's not the same blue as this blue for the B, and we didn't create a swatch for it either. So if you want to sample a color from here, you can just drag this color picker, you drag it on your blue color or whatever color you want it to have over here, and it changes the fill. Or if you have highlighted the outline, it would change the outline to the color you picked. So really easy to use. Now when you are, let's say, ready with your graphics here, you would export this as a PNG file. So you would choose PNG, and you would have a good resolution over here as well. And you can now think about like what would be the good resolution, and let's say you unfortunately saved it with some low resolution, then you can very easily just export another PNG from the Affinity Designer with a larger resolution. Another thing you might want to also check when you're exporting is that before you export, in the document setup, you have your transparent background button. So if you want your background to be transparent, you can toggle this button if you want it that way. You can also customize the UI. So one thing I often like to do is customize toolbar, and there is this feature distribute, this distribute menu. I really like this one, so I'm gonna put it here. And there is also this separator or flexible space here, so I perhaps want to put some space between this button, and I actually this alignment, okay, let's put this alignment here and flexible space over here. I think that's pretty okay. Because what this allows me to do is, if I have let's say this C, and I have like a bunch of these C's here, I can very easily select all these C's, and perhaps I want to align them vertically, and I want to distribute them horizontally, so I would click on this button, and now I have equally spaced C's. So again, very useful if you want to, if you have some, let's say, text elements or whatever you have, and you want to just distribute them evenly across some range. Of course, if I move this one over here, then now I can select those and redistribute them, and they will distribute evenly across the range. So lots of interesting tools to explore, but I would say that I most often just use this main arrow. So this has a hotkey, I think it's V. So if I'm in some other mode, let's say this toolbox mode, and I press normal V, I will get this main arrow. So I'm just moving things around, that's all I'm doing. This grouping is a bit annoying, so I'm also working with layers. So let's group some things in this logical way, and working with this text frame, this text frame text tool. And that's pretty much it. These distributions, alignments, colors, and strokes, and that's the basic things you can use to already do lots of cool design, or like make your graphs much prettier than just your regular GeoGebra illustration. Even here, like this angle size, I would just again, it's grouped down here, so I would just change this font to Rubik. I would make it bold. I would increase the size, and perhaps the color should be this new green that we actually have a swatch, so I should use this swatch here. So now I have a bit different look than your regular default GeoGebra look. And you can find your own visual style and implement it here. So this is this pro workflow that I really recommend you to practice and see what you can make. So the takeaway from this video is that you should be very careful when you're using AI or AI powered tools. The use should be documented, how you used it, what versions, maybe keep a journal. So if the work is extensive, you should have some sort of a journal in the appendix, like how did you exactly use it and how did you use the results in your thesis. And especially if it's a substantive work, if you're actually creating substance for your thesis, then this should be very thoroughly explained, or like reasonably thoroughly explained in your methodology chapters. I recommend you to practice using different illustration software, this GeoGebra, Plotly, Affinity Studio, different things, because, well, there is like a learning curve to all of them. But I would say that for these tools, the learning curve is relatively low, so it's very easy to do some beautiful things already with these, but you still need to have some practice with it. So if the first time you open Affinity Studio is when your poster deadline is in like 1 hour, then that's a problem. So please do the graphs and plots and really try to use these tools for all the different things in your thesis already now, so that you can make your illustrations for your thesis, and later on when you're making a poster or your defense slides, then you already know how things work in these tools. And pick the right tools for the job. So all of these tools have their pros and cons. Like we saw, if you have your GeoGebra illustration and you export it into SVG, the GeoGebra logic is no longer there, so you should already have it like logically sound, and now you can use your Affinity Designer to make it beautiful. So please use these tools, practice using these tools, be mindful of what tools you're using, and these will really make your thesis work a lot more effective.